Okay, 4 more minutes.
People, if he has a question in the section, to see what it means. I don't like.
Okay. Can you be our mic person if people have questions? You could take the mic now. Thank you. Well, I was wondering how come I was hearing Rose's voice. It took me a minute to figure out what was going on with everything else I was trying to understand. So as soon as Cranston comes back on, we'll get started. Okay, we ready?
I'm here, never left.
All right. So we can go live now. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Family Life series. This is the third in a series of 6. The theme of the series is reigniting family resilience. Do you know what it means to have resilience? Yes. Bouncing back and rolling forward from adversities. Things that cause us to stop, to pause, to be confused, or maybe simply upset. When we can bounce back, roll forward, it's a sign of us having resilience. Where do you think resilience came from? Resilience came from God? Well, someone in the audience said it came from God in bouncing back. Our resilience, I imagine, and I'm waiting for God to correct me, I place our resilience right in that tiny mustard seed that God has given us. God has given everyone a measure of faith. And I believe, Cranston, that our resilience lies in that little mustard seed. And if we exercise the use of the littleness of the mustard seed, it will be able to act like a muscle. And we know the more you develop a muscle, what happens? The stronger it becomes. So aren't we thankful today that we have resilience built in It's not something that's accidental. It's planned in our DNA. I believe, until God corrects me, that it's sitting in our mustard seed. So let's thank God for grace. Thank God for his creation. Amen. Well, let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this afternoon's opportunity to talk to families and to share what we have learned, particularly what Brother Cranston has learned. We thank you, Lord, for his willingness to present, his desire to continue on the continuum of educating those around him who want to know more. I appreciate that about anyone, but more than that, I appreciate the fact that Brother Cranston has been so patient with having to be rescheduled today and had a winning attitude about the whole thing. So I thank you for that. Hasten the footsteps of those who are on their way. We thank you for your goodness towards us. May the content today speak to us all where we most need it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I will introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is Cranston Warren Jr. He is actually a member of the Midland Heights Seventh-day Adventist Church, and he was educated at Newbold Primary School in UK, Bermuda Institute, and Union Springs Academy, upstate New York. He furthered his education at Newbold College, Columbia Union College, and now Washington University, from which he graduated with a degree in counseling, psychology, and a minor in communications. He obtained both a master's in counseling, psychology, a master's in business administration from Capella University. Currently, Cranston is living in Southern California and is working for Loma Linda University Behavioral Medical Center as a clinical therapist. In this position, he assists teenagers at risk for suicide and their families to help their families improve their relationships and build healthy coping skills. Cranston is happily married to Lenise Nee Nisbet, and they have 4 children. So hear ye Cranston. Enjoy this event. Also, just a note for those online, I have a survey for feedback for Cranston. And if you want to participate in the feedback and completing a questionnaire, I will put my email in the chat, and you can email me and I will send you the questionnaire to complete and send back. All right? Thank you for your cooperation. Cranston, have a good event.
All right. Thank you, Aunt Judith, for that wonderful introduction that I'm pretty sure my mother wrote. And it's wonderful to see everyone, wonderful to see my home church and everyone online. Welcome, welcome. I was asked to present on communication and conflict. Often when we think about resilience, we think about personal journey on bouncing back from difficult situations. But human beings, we are by nature social creatures. And so therefore our communication with others is extremely important. And ensuring that we have effective communication and we're able to navigate conflict successfully will heighten our ability to bounce back from conflict. Hi, Dad. Thanks for your message. All right. So I'm trying a new presentation tool out today, so bear with me if I get stuck a little bit. I think it's a cool little presentation tool. So our goals for today are to rethink how we communicate a little bit and to reframe how we approach conflict. Okay, so we'll be talking about why we communicate, why it's important we communicate. We'll be talking about effective communication and how we can establish and maintain effective communication. And then finally, we'll look at conflict and how we can manage conflict successfully. I will at times be asking for some crowd participation today, so I hope everybody is prepared and ready to offer some participation as we go through. All right, so let's get rolling. Why do we communicate? Let me ask the question of those of you that are there and maybe online. I don't know, Aunt Judith, if you're able to hand the mic around if people want to participate that are there in the sanctuary. And those of us that are online, you have your mute and unmute buttons. So while you're not speaking, I'll ask that you keep yourself muted. But if you wish to participate while I'm asking questions and asking for volunteers, feel free to unmute yourself. So the question is, why do we communicate? Why do you think we communicate? Why is it communication important for us as people? Anybody have any ideas?
Yes, we communicate to share information.
We do. Yes. Good. Right. Any other reasons we communicate? Sharing information. Okay. Well, what's really important, go ahead.
To express ourselves.
Yes. Okay, somebody was here last week when we tried to get a start. Awesome. All right. So when we think about communication, there are two sides to the communication paradigm, right? There always has to be at least two parties involved. So there is an expressive side and a receptive side, right? So someone who is giving the communication and someone who is receiving the communication. And so from the expressive side, we communicate so that we can give information, like Sister Gampot said, I believe it was, to express our wants and our needs, right? So these are the things that I want, these are the things that I need, being able to express those, or simply just expressing emotion. This is how I feel. This is how this situation makes me feel. Okay? And from the receptive side, we communicate or we engage in communication so that we can better understand others, so that we can better understand the world around us, and so that we can better understand ourselves. So those are the major reasons why we communicate. But sometimes communication breaks down. It doesn't go as well as we intended to, right? And it can break down because from the expressive side, there may be barriers in language, right? We may speak different languages, slightly different dialects. There may be articulation issues, whether that's differences in our accent or whether that's an ability to actually articulate what we're thinking, right? So what's on my mind, it may not be able to come out of my mouth the way that I mean it to, right? Or I may not have the words to express what I'm thinking and feeling. And it may also break down because of the clarity of the message, right? So the message that I'm giving is not necessarily clear, right? It's not precise, it's not concise. The language isn't there to express myself clearly. From the receptive side, communication can break down because of inattentiveness, right? These little things here, these little cell phones, right? We're often on them and busy and doing things that we want to do, and we're engaged in something. And when we're engaged in that and people are engaging with us, we tend to be very inattentive. There are other things that take our attention away as well. TV, reading a good book, can all make us inattentive while we're communicating with others. There could be processing issues on the receptive end that break down communication. And what I mean by that is when I'm receiving information, there may be filters or barriers or even cognitive issues, or where I may not be able to process what's being said to me in the way that it was meant to be received. Right? And finally, I may have an alternative agenda. Right? And we'll talk about what that is a little bit more later. If I'm an alternative agenda while someone is communicating with me, I have something else on my mind. I'm wanting something else to happen. I have ulterior motives for our communication. So for all of those reasons, communication can potentially break down. And so as we go through our effective communication and our conflict management, we'll be talking about ways how we make sure that these things don't happen while we're communicating. All right, hope everybody's still on board. All right, so let's talk about what makes communication effective. Pretty simply, we want to make sure that we have clear expression, clear and concise expression, and successful reception. So, in other words, we want to make sure what's being said is clear, right? And it's being received in the manner that it was meant to be received. And how we teach this is through two ways: expression, I statements, and reception, active listening. Now, I statements are pretty simple. What I statements are is ensuring that when I'm communicating with someone, I'm beginning my communication with expressing how I feel. So we can start with a simple sentence of I feel, and inserting an emotion. I feel frustrated when something happens, and an explanation of why I feel frustrated. So I feel frustrated when I come home at the end of a long day and the house is dirty or the dishes are not done. That seems to be a common theme in my parenting and family groups, right? Something about chores or dishes or trash, right? So I feel frustrated when I come home and the dishes are not done. Oftentimes when we communicate with others, especially when we're communicating negative emotions or when we have issues, we use what we call a lot of you statements, right? So you never do the dishes on time, or you never do your chores, or right? And when we do that, right, the receiving party of that communication feels attacked. That you statement makes someone feel attacked. And when someone feels attacked, their natural response is to become defensive. So I'm going to defend myself against this attack. And in doing so, we see escalation, right? So there's attack and defense, and there's escalation between those two individuals over whatever issue that they're having. So what I statements help us to do is to avoid that whole attack defense paradigm, right? So I'm making whatever issue, I'm making it about me. I'm expressing it about what I need or what I want, right? Or what emotion I'm feeling at the time. And I'm being very clear about what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way. And if you want to go a little bit further in expression of I statement, what's really great to do is to express what I would like in the future. Right? So, for instance, I feel frustrated when I come home and the dishes are not done. What I would like in the future is for the dishes to be done before I get home. Right? So here's an opportunity for your participation. I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and what I would like you to do is to construct an I statement. Think about maybe a situation that you're having with your family, with a friend, with a spouse, and construct an I statement that expresses or you would use to communicate with that individual about how you're feeling about that situation. All right. So I will give you a couple minutes to do that. And after you're finished, I want one brave soul to share that I statement with you. Okay. So I'll give you 2 minutes to do that. All right. All right. Hey, hello. Anybody wish to share their I statement? What have you prepared?
I am tired of saying the same thing to you over and over.
Okay. All right. Who is? I didn't catch a name.
Oh,
John.
Sister Gampod.
Hi, Sister Gampot.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, how do you feel when you have to say the same thing over and over again, Sister Gampot?
I feel that the other person is not listening because I have to tell them the same thing over and over. So that means they were not listening to me in the first place.
Okay.
Or maybe they didn't, I don't know, listening.
Right. So, can we name that emotion that you're feeling?
A little bit frustrated.
Frustration. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when I construct an I statement, that name of that emotion I want to put up front, right? I feel frustrated. How many people can identify with ever feeling frustrated? Most of us, right? And so when I express I feel frustrated, people can empathize with that feeling because they felt that as well. Right? As much as possible, when I'm constructing my I statements, I want to try to keep the word you out of them altogether. And when you try constructing I statements, when you first start doing this, that's going to seem very, very difficult to not say you at all. Right? So if I'm taking Sister Gampot's I statement, right? Let me see if I get this right, Sister Gampot. You say, I feel as you don't listen to me, or I have to repeat myself over and over again, right?
Yes, I said I'm tired of telling you the same thing over and over.
Right.
Yes.
So how would it sound, Sister Gampot, if I said to you, I feel frustrated when I have to constantly repeat myself?
Yes, that sounds okay.
right? Does that sound different than saying you never listen to me, or I'm tired of telling you things over and over again?
Yeah, it sounds different, but it
Mhm.
means the same.
It does, right? But if I say to you, I'm tired of telling you the same thing over and over again, there's an element of attack there.
Attack,
Right?
yes, yes,
But if I
yes,
say, Sister Grandpa, I feel frustrated when I have to repeat myself.
yes,
Right?
yes.
You can identify with what I'm feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes you more receptive to what I'm saying after that, especially if I'm not using the word you. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? Because when I say you, I'm attacking you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Not intentionally, but that's how it's received in communication.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
I'm rethinking the way I communicate, and it seems really subtle and really minor, but it makes a huge difference when I'm communicating with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? All right, so that's how I want you to think about constructing your I statement. All right? So as you move forward, and you, especially when we're having difficult conversations and trying to communicate difficult messages to people, if I'm constructing my sentences as I statements in that way, I know that they will be received better. That's the first part of our communication paradigm, right? That expressive communication. I want to make sure that what I'm saying is going to be received in the best way possible. So as the communicator, it's my responsibility to try to construct my statements in a way that are going to have the best chance of being received well. Okay. So the second part of our communication paradigm is active listening. I've always heard there's an old saying that goes something like, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. I don't know. I may have heard that from my parents at some time. I'm sure my father will deny it, but I'm sure that's where I've heard that. But I heard another statement recently. I think it comes from country music that I really grafted to. Actually found it kind of funny. And it said, you're transmitting when you should be receiving, like an old radio, right? You're transmitting when you should be receiving. And there's a reason why those statements hold so much truth, because probably, and this is where we're rethinking communication, listening is the most important part of the communication process. There was a great article in the New York Times a few years ago called The Dying Art of Disagreement. And basically what it was saying is that as people, as society, we've forgotten how to disagree and to not have escalating conflict. And that's true at the individual level as well. We're having great difficulty disagreeing on subjects and being able to resolve our disagreements. And part of that, a large part of that, is because we don't know how to listen. So let's talk about active listening. Okay. And the first thing we want to do when we're listening, that we talked about earlier, is to act like we're listening. We want to put away all distractions. So turn the TV off, put my phone down, stop reading that wonderful book. And I want to give verbal and nonverbal cues. What are those? Right? When you go to school for counseling, they teach you about posture. So open body posture and closed body posture. And so when I'm listening to someone, I want to make sure that my posture is open. Right? And so think about it this way. Anytime something is crossed, my arms, anything is crossed, that's closed body posture. And that makes it seem like I don't want to be there. I don't want to listen. I'm not really wanting to pay attention to what you're communicating to me. An open body posture is remaining open, arms open, right? Available, sitting upright or standing upright, making good eye contact, appropriate eye contact, right? Are all important things that we want to give when we're listening to someone. And nonverbal and verbal cues are things that we do pretty regularly, right? So saying little words that say we're listening, yes, oh, that sounds interesting, right? So little verbal cues along the way that say I'm paying attention and I'm listening to what you're saying. The second part of active listening is where we really need to rethink our communication. And that is listening to understand. Most times what happens when we're communicating with others, what most people do is I listen to respond. So you listen to what someone else is saying, and while they're speaking, in your mind, you're formulating what you're going to say next. How am I going to refute that? How am I going to break down their argument? How am I going to show them that they're wrong? And so you're listening to respond to what that person has to say. So instead, what I want you to do is listen to understand, right? Our goal in communication as the person who's on the receiving end of communication, right, is to make sure that I fully understand what someone is saying before I begin to formulate my own opinion. And I do that by not interrupting. So while they're speaking, I'm giving verbal and nonverbal cues, and I'm listening, and I'm giving them good eye contact, and I'm not interrupting them. I'm allowing them to finish their thought. I don't want to listen to respond, and I'm not trying to find solutions. As you can imagine, this is going to take some practice. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time to get really good at this. What can help me as I listen to understand is to ask clarifying questions. And what clarifying questions are, they're open-ended questions. And think of open-ended questions as questions that you can't answer yes or no to. So if you can answer yes or no to the question, it's not an open-ended question. So the goal of asking clarifying questions is to get someone to give you more information about what they're thinking or how they're feeling. And finally, with active listening, the last part of active listening is I want to reflect what I've heard. And what a reflection is I'm paraphrasing what you said to me, and I'm giving it back to you. So like with Sister Gampot says, I feel frustrated when I have to repeat myself over and over again. So Sister Gampot, what I hear you saying is you don't want to have to repeat yourself over and over again. It gets tedious and frustrating, right? So I've kind of put that in my own words. And what I'm looking for here is confirmation from the speaker that I've understood what's been said. Because that's the whole goal of communication. Clear expression, successful reception. So at the end of my acting like I'm listening to understand, asking clarifying questions, and reflecting, my hope is that I've understood what's been said to me. So I'm seeking confirmation. The goal is to have the individual say, yes, that's exactly what I mean. Right? You want that sort of response from them when you're reflecting, and you know you have it right. And at that point, the communication roles can switch. Right? Now it's your opportunity to be the speaker, and the other person is now the listener, and you change roles. Okay. So a few tips for communicating effectively. So you want to practice with light topics first, right? Because it's going to take some time to get used to. When you first start communicating differently or using new skills, they're going to seem cumbersome and a little awkward. And it's going to take a little while to get used to crafting successful I statements, right? Like we say, try to eliminate you completely, right? That's going to take a little bit of time and finesse. So I've had a lot of practice at it, so it's easy for me to think of an I statement that doesn't have you in it. And even sometimes for me, it's difficult, right? Use props if you have to when you're communicating. Right? So as a family, get together, maybe decide on, hey, we have this extra piece of tile laying around. That's gonna represent the floor, right? Who has the floor? That's the person that gets to speak, right? Maybe I have a microphone laying around my house, or something that or talking stick, which is typical in African cultures, right? You have a talking stick. Whoever has the stick, that's their opportunity. They have the floor. They're the communicator, and the rest of us, or the other individual, is actively listening. And when the roles switch, we exchange the prop, and that can help us in our communication, streamlining and growing it in changing and rethinking the way that we communicate. Any questions about effective communication, I statements, and active listening before I move on to conflict? Okay, clear as mud? All right, let's jump into conflict. So learning effective communication helps us to more successfully manage conflict. But there are some things about conflict that we need to understand as well. So conflict is typically caused by us being inflexible, right? So I have an idea of how things should go, and I'm not willing to compromise at all. This is how it has to be, and I will accept no other way. When we enter communication with others in that way, or when we enter into talking about problems with others that way, more often than not, we'll find ourselves in escalation and in conflict. Poor communication can cause conflict. Right? Unclear expectations can cause conflict. Right? And we should couple with that making assumptions. Right? So if I'm giving someone expectations and they're unclear, right, or I have something in my mind that I expect to happen and someone doesn't live up to that, we may have conflict. Or if someone assumes that something should be a certain way, or that I'm thinking a certain way and that's not how things are, then we may find ourselves in conflict. Differences, all sorts of differences, right? So differences in our value system, differences in the way that we see the world, differences in what I like and what you like may cause conflict. So all of these things can cause conflict. Now, conflict is not a bad thing because we're all different. So we're bound to have conflict. We're bound to have issues between us, and that's okay. Where things begin to degrade is when we allow ourselves to get in cycles of escalation. So we want to avoid escalation. And we can avoid escalation by using the communication skills we just talked about. We can listen non-judgmentally. We can use I statements, right, that we talked about. We can listen to understand. That's our asking clarifying questions, using our reflections and seeking confirmation. And then most importantly, as families and as communities, have a plan for resolving or managing conflict. And I have two things that I want to share with you today that I use frequently with my families in our therapeutic sessions, using fair fighting rules and using a structured conflict resolution tool. The one that I'm bringing today is just a simple 5 steps to resolving conflict. So our fair fighting rules, before we begin talking about anything or engaging in any discussion about things that we may have differences about, I want to ask myself why I feel upset. This is going to be very helpful when we start talking about how we manage conflict or our plan to manage conflict, because it's very important that I understand why I'm upset. It helps me develop my I statements properly, and it also helps me get to the root of the problem, which is very, very important for resolving conflict. The second rule of fair fighting is to discuss one topic at a time. Oftentimes when we get into discussions or we get into conflict, we'll start on one thing, like doing the dishes or having to repeat myself over and over. And before we know it, every problem that we've ever had is part of the discussion, right? And nothing gets solved that way. No problems get solved that way. And we continue having the same conflicts over and over again because we're trying to fix everything all at once. So if we stick to one topic at a time, we'll have much more success in resolving conflict. The third rule of fair fighting is no degrading language. So no name calling, no cussing and swearing at each other, right? So no use of degrading language. The fourth rule is using our effective communication tools, the I statement and the active listening that we talked about. Fifth is no stonewalling. Stonewalling is where I'm being inflexible, right? So I refuse to communicate, I shut down, I'm not engaging any longer, right? And so someone's trying to communicate with me and I refuse to engage in communication. That's stonewall, right? So we want to avoid that altogether. And we have some ways to avoid, because there are many different reasons why people stonewall. They can become afraid or anxious. They're processing information a little slower, so they don't know how to respond, right? And so there are some really simple tools that we can use to eliminate stonewalling. That's simply communicating that, you know, I'm not in a place to talk right now. Let's come back and discuss this later, right? Our next rule is no yelling, right? Getting louder doesn't solve problems, doesn't solve issues. Being louder than someone else doesn't make you right. It only makes you louder. And often when you get loud, the other person gets loud as well, and we enter a cycle of escalation. We also want to take a time out if things become too heated. As people become more and more frustrated and angry and upset, our ability to use logic and ration decreases. So as we become more upset, we become less and less rational. So when you're upset, it's not a great time to try to resolve conflict. So it's important to be able to take a time out if things become heated. Now, there are some important rules around this particular fair fighting rule. What often will happen when someone says, I need time away or I need to calm down, is we never come back to solve the issue. So we never come back to the table to sit down and have conversation. And so then it's important to be able to set a time to come back and continue the discussion. And there are a couple of ways we can do that. As a family, we can sit down and we can set a standard time where we all take a break, right? So we can agree as a family that whenever we need to take a break, it's 30 minutes or we get an hour or however long we need to take as a family to go calm down, have a breather, and then we'll come back and we'll finish our discussion, whatever we're talking about. Okay? So that helps everyone involved have an idea of when we're coming back to the table to finish solving this problem. And then our final rule is we're always looking for compromise and understanding. I often tell parents in my group that there are probably only about 2 or 3 things in your household that are going to be hard and fast rules. So things that you're just not going to be inflexible on. Everything else, we should be able to compromise and come to an understanding, whether that's with our spouse or with our kids or with our friends. We should be able to compromise them. So in our conflict resolution, we're always looking to come to an understanding and come to a compromise. So there are 5 steps to conflict resolution that we're going to use. The first one is to clearly define the problem. And this is where our first rule in fair fighting helps, right? So before I begin conflict, I want to understand why I'm upset. What is the actual problem? Often what we do when we're in conflict is we make problems personal. So you never do the dishes, or you never take out the trash, or I'm always having to repeat myself to you, right? That makes the problem personal. So what we try to do when we're clearly defining the problem is to take the people out of the problem altogether. So what is the actual problem? The dishes need to get done. The trash needs to be taken out. It can't be sitting there all week. Things need to be done in a reasonable time frame, right? So we want to clearly define what the problem is. What this helps us do when we're solving conflict is work together to solve the problem, right? Instead of fighting each other when we're feeling attacked. So when I've clearly defined the problem, now we become a team. And as a team, we can be much more successful at solving problems. But even in that team, we all see things a little different. And so the second step in our conflict management is to understand all perspectives. So everybody involved in solving this problem needs to be understood. And this is where our communication tools come in, our I statements and our active listening. So everybody should have an opportunity to express themselves and be understood. This is how I feel about this situation. And so when we're done with that portion, everyone should have a pretty good understanding of how everyone views the problem. Because our goal is to understand, right, in our communication. And once we understand that, it becomes a lot easier to now brainstorm solutions, which is our third step. Right? And if anyone has ever done any brainstorming before, brainstorming is simply throwing out all the ideas that could possibly solve the problem without evaluating them on the spot. Right? So I'm just throwing out everything, throwing stuff against the wall. This can work, this could work, this could work, this might work. Right? So we're just putting everything down on paper or on the whiteboard or however you want to collect this information. Right? And then we'll go over those solutions and identify 2 or 3 that are probably most viable. We'll come to a consensus on which one is probably going to be the best. Right? We may have to make some adjustments to that, and we'll identify in our 4th step the most viable solution, the one that we think is probably going to be the one that's going to solve our problem. Right? And once we identify that, then we're able to make an agreement to move forward and put this solution in place. So when I was at Bermuda Hospital, I told my group there, my group of workers and managers that, hey, when we're in the conference room, this is where we flush out all of our ideas. This is where we have our disagreements and make sure we get everything out in the open. But when we walk out the door after we've made an agreement, everybody needs to be on the same page. Right? Everybody needs to be doing what we agreed to do. Because if we don't do that, then we don't know if the solution actually works. So we come to the table as a family and we make an agreement and you're not doing what we agreed, then we can't evaluate whether the solution we put in place works or not. So once we make the agreement, it's everyone's responsibility to stick to the terms of the agreement. Again, time is an important thing, right? So once we make an agreement, it's important to put a testing period in place. Right? So at the end of the month, we're going to come back and review the solution. Is it working? Or what's working, what's not working? Right? So we can make any adjustments that need to be made to our agreement, or maybe try one of the other solutions that we identified during our conflict resolution process. So after we make those agreements, everyone needs to be pulling in the same direction. And so, if we are able to use our effective communication techniques, use our fair fighting rules, and our 5 steps to conflict resolution, we're able to rethink our communication, reframe our conflict, improve our relationships, and be more resilient in the process. Any questions?
Yes. Can you get some people that won't open up to any form of communication, depending on how deeply they feel about the situation that you may be involved in that they sort of not stonewall, but just don't want to basically hear you. Something like what's going on in Ukraine between Putin and Biden. No one wants to talk at all. How do you break through something like that?
So what we're talking about, brother, I didn't catch your name.
John.
Brother John. All right. So we're talking about someone that doesn't want to engage in communication at all. Right? So here's the sticky point, right? Because oftentimes as individuals and as people, we frustrate ourselves by trying to control things that are outside of our control, right? So the more that I try to control the way that someone else thinks, the way they act, what they do, where they go, right? The more frustrated I become, because in reality, I have no control over those things. I only have control over myself and how I act and how I communicate. Right? So in that situation, my best course of action is to simply communicate that I'm available for communication. I cannot force someone to communicate with me. It'll only frustrate me. Oftentimes, though, to answer your question, because I know that's probably not the answer you're looking for, what we don't realize is that when I change my reaction to someone else, it changes the way that they react to me. So my goal now is, by identifying that I have no control over them and I only have control over myself, I'm going to think about ways that I can approach this individual differently that changes the way that they're reacting to me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so,
Makes
so
sense.
maybe there's another approach or something, another way that I can engage, right? So maybe that I need to build trust with this person because maybe they don't trust me, right? Or maybe I need to engage them in another way and build our relationship differently so that they feel now comfortable communicating with me about this difficult subject.
I can ask another question. The reason why I asked that question because in a community like Bermuda, I learned from experience that you can get through to some people. You have to bring in other people to help you move that person in a certain direction, to sort of break them down, to have a different understanding, because maybe I may not be communicating clearly to them in order to change their position. But what often happens also when you bring in a third party, you have people influencing the outcome. So how do you break that impasse?
Okay. Very vague about probably a very specific situation.
It sounds like he's speaking about triangulating.
Yes, very much. But again, in communication and effective communication, right? Oftentimes, and I'm sure Sister Judith can attest to this as well, when you take the time to understand where someone else is coming from, if they don't understand or if they don't comprehend or use the effective communication tools we talked about today, often just taking the time to understand someone else's position, if you take the time to actively listen, understand, and seek confirmation that you understood where that individual is coming from, they'll be more open to receiving what you have to communicate.
So what you're actually saying, for my understanding purposes, because we're communicating as well. So is there any time that you set up parameters or boundaries or borders as far as like some things remain in-house and some things are external? Should there be a fair fight rule to say that what's said here stays here, or has to be an agreement to take it outside of the house or to the public domain, so to speak?
Absolutely. So effective communication and being vulnerable about, so let me use my effective communication, right? So what I hear you saying is there are situations that you feel that there should be boundaries and or an understanding of confidentiality, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, right? And see the seek to understand, seek confirmation, right? And so, yes, absolutely. So many people fear, especially in a small community like Bermuda, where your business kind of gets everywhere pretty quickly, right? There are times where people won't share because they don't want their business out there. They don't want people to know everything about them. They want some form of safety. And so setting up boundaries and setting expectations of confidentiality, what's said here stays here, right? And maintaining that is very important to making people feel comfortable being vulnerable, right? Opening myself up, discussing difficult topics. Anyone that doesn't have a sense of safety is not going to want to be vulnerable. They're not going to want to open up, which is why I said earlier with your first question, there are many reasons why people may not want to have conversations or engage in communication. And that is one of them, a lack of feeling safe. They don't feel safe. And so, yeah, setting up those parameters and making someone feel safe can free them and allow them to be more vulnerable in that situation. Yes, Sister Gampart.
Yeah, I would also like to say that sometimes people need time. They are not ready to share. They are not ready to open up. And you said it earlier, you cannot force people. So sometimes we need to give people time. If they're not ready, we just need to leave it alone.
Yeah, right. And that is just simply making myself available, right? So we answer the discussion and it's clear that they don't want to open up. Well, you know what, sister or brother, whenever you're ready, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
There are often, most times there are two different people in that, two different ways people like to solve conflict, right? And my wife and I are a great example of that, right? So my wife, she's online. I hope I don't get in trouble for this. Love you, baby. She's a pursuer, right? So she wants to solve problems right now. Right? This is a problem. I need to solve it. Let's deal with this. Let's get it done. Let's finish it. Let's find a solution. She wants. I need to think about things. I need to process. So I'll withdraw. I want to tackle a problem immediately. So then you have this problem. She wants to solve it. I want to run away. Right? And so what we need to do in that situation is, especially my wife, is she needs to identify that I'm not ready to deal with this issue. Right? I still need time to think about it and think about how I really feel about it and what my role is with this problem. But it's also my responsibility to communicate with my wife that, hey, I'm not ready to talk about this. Let's talk about this tomorrow. Let's talk about this in an hour, right? So she knows, as someone who really wants to solve the issue, that, hey, we're going to solve this problem, but I just need to wait and be patient until this time. And that's how we can solve issues and deal with that when we have people that are on those spectrums, where both people make that compromise and can be happy solving that conflict.
I'm coming in, chiming in again.
Sure.
Yeah, John again. Sorry for keeping interrupting.
No, you're all right.
Okay. When a conversation descends, right, people are talking, trying to communicate. People descend into personal vendettas and things like that. Do they do that because they're losing the argument, or because they're sharing vulnerability, or they just run out of things to say? How would you categorize?
But what you're asking is, why do people resort to personal attacks?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There are several reasons people resort to personal attacks. One, they feel attacked, and so they feel that they need to retaliate, defend themselves, and retaliate. They may feel, as you say, they're losing the argument, which, if we frame conflict as a win-lose situation, everybody loses. Right? If I go into conflict thinking that I need to win, then I've already lost. Because when we communicate, our goal is to reach compromise, is to understand each other and come to an understanding. And so, but yes, when people use personal attacks, they feel that they're losing, or they feel attacked themselves, right? There's an old phrase that says, hurt people, right? So if I feel hurt, if I feel attacked, if I feel under attack, then I'm going to attack as well. And if I no longer have a logical argument, then the only thing that I have are personal attacks. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I hope you've learned something today about how we can communicate effectively.
One question.
One more question? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Hendrickson. I have some young men who they're very reactive, and these are my seniors, and I also have middle schoolers who I have tried to explain to them that they have no control over what others say. They can only control themselves. But I don't think just saying that is getting the point across to them. What can I do to help them to understand that they don't have to take on every little thing that is said about them, but in a way where I am not damaging their self-esteem or help causing them to feel defenseless. That's one. And in the second instance, with my seniors, how do I get them to understand that they don't have to react to everything? They are just so very defensive, and they believe that they are at that place where you have to be careful what you say to them, because they take it on and they are willing to come to blow if necessary to defend their honor as men. How do I help them to just, I don't even know what to.
Okay, Stephanie, that is a massive subject. And I say that because it comes down to a few things, right? We have a few things involved here. One is the developmental process. So where they are as individuals, your middle schoolers especially, right? That's where we start beginning to want to fit in and seem like we're a part of everything else, right? So anything that's done to me or said about me that takes me away from that I'm part of the collective or I'm one of the cool kids, right, is an attack on myself. And so I'm reactive to that because now I have to defend my spot in society, right? Same thing with your seniors, that as well, right? There's a little bit more there too, though. But in that developmental process, in that age range, it's still very much about me, right? So when you think about human development, when you're born, what we're taught is that the world revolves around you, right? So I cry, I get fed, I cry, I get burped, I cry, I get my pamper changed, right? And everybody around me does these things for me, right? And it takes a long while for us to get out of that and start thinking about the world from other people's perspectives. Some of us never really get there. And so in the developmental phase that they're in, those middle schoolers and high schoolers, they're still very much in a me phase. The world is all about me. And I can only see the world from my perspective. Also, as a society, we teach men certain things about how they should be and how they should act in society and how they should react in society. And so while I think you should still encourage them the way that you've been encouraging them, the solution for the way that they are responding to outside stimuli, the situations that they see or perceive as adverse, the solution to that is much more complex. So it will have to be a shift in the way that we're teaching our young men to be in the world, the way that we teach them to act in society and respond to each other. And that can be done in a number of ways, right? So what we expect from them as parents, how we educate them socially, right? How we and the services that are available to them when they are having difficulty expressing themselves. As an individual, in your position, continuing to encourage them to develop a set of skills that allow them to find a break between experiencing stimuli and responding to stimuli would be important, right? So maybe as a teacher, what you can do, or what I would do as a teacher, if you know anything about mindfulness skills or any coping skills, things like easy skills to learn, things like deep breathing. One of my favorite skills is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What that is, it's a mindfulness skill that helps refocus the brain from whatever it is that I'm thinking about or whatever emotional response that I'm having onto something else. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is just looking around at 5 things I can see, 4 things I can feel, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing I can taste. And when I go through that process, or when you go through that process in your brain, it refocuses the brain away from whatever it is that was causing that intense emotion and gives you the space and time to calm down a little bit. The same thing can be said of deep breathing and a range of different coping skills that we can use. So in your position as a teacher, what I would do is I would continue to encourage them to not respond immediately to stimuli, encourage them to take control over their own reactions and behavior, right? And along with that, maybe teach 1 or 2 of these things, or do it together with your class. Right? So teach a breathing skill. Box breathing is really easy to teach. Right? So you take an inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, release for 4 seconds, pause for 4 seconds, right? So 4 fours, right? Really easy to remember, really easy to do, really easy to teach, right? And deep breathing when I'm feeling upset, when I'm angry, when something bothers me, helps me to take that second to think about what my response is going to be. Or doing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to refocus. That's also a great one for anxiety as well. All right. So doing things like that with your class, with the middle schoolers and high schoolers, and teaching them those skills and encouraging them to take a break between what happened to me or what I experienced and how I respond. Encouraging that break and learning to have control. What I find most of my kids enjoy is learning that, hey, I have control over what I'm thinking. I can challenge my thoughts and change how I perceive situations. That helps me have better control over my emotions, how I feel, or how elevated my emotions become. And I also have full control over my reactions. And here's what they love. When I learn how to do all that, I was talking to John earlier, right? When I learn how to do all that, I can change the way that I interact with other people, which then changes the way that they interact with me. And so when I gain more control over myself, I begin to have more control over the world around me by having more control over myself. Does that answer your question?
She said yes, thank you.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to make a quick comment. A lot of times, especially I guess with males, they would more tend to need a strong male positive mentor to clarify some things for them, because a lot of our young males are in single parent homes and the fathers are not present. So they don't have that strong male bond or mentorship or guidance. So I don't know if the school has a male day or anything that they can use to bring positive males on campus in order to reinforce what the teacher is going to bring to the table with these new techniques. And maybe that can also help, because coming from a male perspective, a lot of times a male needs a male to look up to in order to recognize that the direction that they're going or the reaction that they have is not proportional to the situation that they're encountering.
Yeah. Thank you.
John again. From a male's perspective, growing up as a male, you fall down. People say, "Get up, a big boy, don't cry." So we suppressed a lot of feelings. We're not told to get into a feelings like girls feel, women do.
Yeah.
You know, they cry about stuff and they discuss it out and they go through the whole ring of things to get it resolved, whereas they get stability again back in their life order. Males, we don't have that. It's told to get out of that, and anything suppressed will surface at some given time, sometimes unexpectedly. And I think a lot of that is being played out in our society through these gangs and things like that, because guys introverts go deeper than themselves as opposed to be outward, they go inward. And it's a digression in their development, you know, as far as the growing patterns and stuff like that. So it's dysfunction and things happen to their life. From a male perspective, it's hard when people say, "Get over it," you know, "Man up," you know, all those things. You can't tell me what I'm experiencing as a male when you're not a male, or how to raise children when you never had children of your own, so to speak. You have to have a stake in it. You have to have skin in the game, so to speak. And I just think that, you know, piggybacking on what Sis just finished saying, it's all important that we don't miss that aspect, that we encourage males every day of their development, that they do have value system. They can express themselves without being called gay, without being called all types of derogatory names, you know, mama's boy, crybaby, things like that. You know, we overlook that and think it's okay, but we don't realize we're doing long-term damage to the individual.
Yes, thank you, John. That is an excellent point, Brian. There was an article that I quoted in one of my articles once that said, one of the worst things you can say to your son is be a man. And because we often say that, like John was saying, in situations where we're forcing young boys to suppress or reject their emotions, because we label these emotions, especially sadness, as weak. But the other thing is that we teach our boys that anger and violence is strength. So we don't frown on that. Right? So society at large teaches them that this angry reaction, not anger itself, but the reaction that comes with that, shows strength, shows dominance, right? That animal kingdom style dominance, where in order to be the alpha male or the big man on the block, I have to conquer all of my foes, sort of thing. Right? And so that through our society, that's been taught. So which is why we see these violent reactions when young boys perceive that they've been violated or that they've been disrespected. Because I've been taught that the response to that is to show that I'm more dominant in and that is with violence and anger. We often also don't let individuals as a society, men and women, express anger, right? Because we associate anger with what most times we perceive the reactions to anger are, right? To the violence, the whatever else we see, right? The negative sides or how people negatively react to their emotions. And what I like to teach people is that there are no bad emotions. There are negative emotions that make me feel negatively, and there are positive emotions that make me feel positively. And so learning to express those that full range of emotion through effective communication and conflict resolution, right, helps me then avoid all of the negative behavioral things that we often attribute to the negative emotion. All right. I think I've gone way over my time, Sister Judith.
The interest of your brothers and sisters dictated winding down time.
All right.
Not you, not I. Their needs are great, and that's why we decided to host
Yeah.
this event and events like it, so that they could have a safe place to ask those questions and to receive answers from people they can value and respect, especially the people who are sharing have the same belief system that they have. It's a little easier, and I have done my best to put in front of our brothers and sisters people who believe like them, to give them the kind of answers that they're searching for. So thank you for being my valued partner that I can call on at any time. Thank your family for sharing you with us this afternoon, because there is a time difference. And I know that we are taking you some of the time from your Sabbath with your family. So please thank them and let them know how much I appreciate them for giving you the bend of time to do this. I appreciate that. So everybody's been served, and I've said thank you to the presenter. Now I want to focus on the presentation for next week. Next week's presentation is on mental health. And Cranston, I was trying to decide where to put you. So pick you up on mental health on the next one, because I know you would have enjoyed that. Next week, we will have in the room with us the Director of Mental Health Services from Mid-Atlantic Wellness Institute. As a panelist, Sharon Simmons. She's a nurse practitioner, and you have met her. You may not remember that you've all met her. She's been here before, worshiping with us. It's been a while since she's been here, but she agreed on the spot. She was happy to come, and I was thankful for that. We are also going to have Gwendolyn Query, who is, can you move so I can see behind where Cranston's sitting? Yes. Gwendolyn Query, who is a infant and early childhood mental health consultant, because I want us to learn that mental health goes through all of life's human development stages, not just some, but all. And so she's going to share her insight on that. And because I'm the moderator and I always think I have so much to share, I will be a part of the discussion. The third person I'm trying to get a hold of, I know they're going to say yes if they have the time. I just know they're going to say yes, but they are a very busy person. So I'm really hopeful that they will be here next week, and they will offer a wide range of involvement with mental health, right across the spectrum of mental health. So next week, unfortunately, we are not going to do online. We will be in the sanctuary next week, and if you are unable to catch it online, we definitely will have it on YouTube 2 hours later. So next week, we're inviting everyone to consider to be here in the sanctuary for 4:30. We will be looking at building mental health awareness. I don't think it's any of us under the sound of my voice who doesn't even have a family member that is touched by mental health concerns that we might have concerns for. So hope to see you next week for next week's fourth part of the series. And we're going to have Brother Cranston close us out in prayer. Thank you for staying by, Cranston.
All right, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, I thank you for the opportunity to come together and talk about ways that we can improve our communication together, come to understanding, which is something that you prescribed for us in your word, to come together and reach understanding of our brethren. And learning how to communicate effectively and work through conflict and manage our conflict effectively is an important part of it. So thank you for the opportunity for us to come together and the opportunity you've given me to interact with my church family at home in Bermuda and bring them the information and the answers that they need to help them effectively do that. Be with us as we go forward. Help us to be able to put these tools into place and be loving and caring towards each other as we communicate more effectively. Be with those that are traveling, give them traveling mercies back to their homes. In your name we pray.
Amen.
Dismissed, and thank you for your faithfulness in attending. I have appreciated it. If you can turn in your sheets, that would be good.
Thank you. And Elder Cranston. Lenise, hi.
Lenise is there?
Yay.
Okay, we want to see them all. Come on, Lenise.
Thank you so
That's
much.
what happens when you're family. Your family wants to see you.
She may be hiding.
Tell her we love
Yes.
her.
I'm hiding.
Okay, stay hidden. Stay hidden.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Lenise. We miss you.
Everybody stand still, love.
Love you.
Okay, take care.
Love you
All right,
guys
thank you,
too.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.